We're going to go to Thomas in Tennessee. Pronouns are he, him. Wants to know if we have experienced people accusing us of not being true believers after deconversion. It's going to be a little different, I think, from me and Johnny's perspective, as we don't come from the same background. So, Johnny, why don't you start it off for us? Well, first,
Yes.
actually, you know what? First off, I'm rude. Thomas, how are you doing?
Yeah.
I'm doing fine. Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Good.
Great to have you on. Have we experienced
You.
people not believing us after deconversion? Well, I deconverted, I guess, when I was in... Oh, well, you know what? Go ahead. What were you going to say? You had maybe some finer points to put on that?
Let me try to explain it for you.
Yeah, thanks.
What I'm actually saying is people have, said in the past, well, you're an atheist now, well, you must never have been a Christian. And here's my perspective on it. If you would have asked me 10 or 11 years ago, I probably would have said, hell yes, I was a Christian. I was brought up Catholic school, church on Sundays. I was an altar boy. I played in folk mass. I was a guitar player, all those things. But now when I think about it, it's been, 10 or 11 years. And now I think about it, I'm like, well, I was as secular as could be. Like, I played in a punk band, and I did all the things that go with that. I was a drinker. I was a drug doer. I did everything. That was my life, was music.
Mm-hmm.
And now I think about it, it's like I was so secular and didn't even realize I believed in God all the way to about 10 years ago. And then after that, I had a marriage not work on for me, and I was having a difficult time dealing with it. And that's why I'm atheist now. But, and I wanted to see if you guys,
Sorry, can I ask you? Sorry, I might be being too pedantic. You said that's why I'm atheist now. What was
I heard that too.
What was the reason? I just want to make sure it's not coming from. Because it sounded like you went through some emotional stuff there, obviously, and so I want to make sure your reasons don't stem from that kind of emotional bias.
It was terrible. I was not dealing with it, and therefore, Actually, one thing I did, I guess I better bring this up. I always saved a lot of prayers for the time that I would need it the most. And at that point is when I really prayed. And then, basically I was just talking to air. There was nothing there. And then I realized that anytime I've asked for prayer before, most of the time it just never happened. So,
Okay.
So, yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So that's sorry. I didn't want to be overly pedantic there. I just wanted to make sure it wasn't for reasons that really actually wouldn't justify not believing, or at least if you got to a position of saying like God does not exist, which I didn't know if I heard you, which is obviously a different claim. But yeah, sorry. I just wanted to make sure. But yeah, Johnny, I want to make sure you get your point that you were going to say there at the beginning.
I've lost my point. But Thomas, my understanding is that you stopped believing when you realized that your prayers in times of hardship were just thoughts to yourself going out into the void. Is that the correct understanding? Is that how you came to realize that you didn't believe in God, or was there something else? We're getting far afield from the original point of your call, but that's it. Okay.
No, that is it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, if we want to bring it back to the description of your call, have I ever been told that I was never a true believer? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I have. I've also been told that I actually believe, that I just don't accept that I believe, by a good friend of mine who I've mentioned on the show a bunch of times. Good buddy of mine. And I just throw back at him, well, you don't actually believe. You just want to, belong to a club, or you're afraid of the reality of things. And I don't mean it either. I just throw it back at him as kind of oh yeah, well, I can do that game too, pal. So yeah, that was my experience. Mike has a very different experience because I think he was raised differently, right, Mike?
Yeah, I my family's Catholic, but I wasn't really raised Catholic. I had a
Ah,
lot of freedom in that sense.
Mhm.
So I kind of formed my own beliefs in terms of like I'd put it in the category of spiritual or like new age, but not it's not really identical to like today's new age. It's similar. It was really just things I made up and or people could tell me and I would just believe because I had really bad standards of evidence and I was willing um to choose certain stories um as convincing over having the facts of the world take precedent. And so I've never really experienced because I didn't since those were very personal and it wasn't part of like a group. I didn't have that back. There was no backlash to be said. Um, but that said, I do get it from the other end of that. People will tell me that I do actually believe, and they'll cite things like Romans 1:20 or something like that. Which, um, yeah, just my same tactic would be similar to Johnny's. It's just that yeah, you don't actually believe in this God that has contradictory properties that we can show from my perspective isn't real. But
So between the two of us, we get it from both ends,
yeah.
basically.
oh,
But how about you? Have you experienced that yourself, Thomas? Have you been told that, and what's your reaction when you're told that you were never a real believer, or when you're told that you still believe you're just in a kind of denial phase? What happens when you hear those things?
well, my my new wife always says, you were a Christian, right? And I'm like, I lived so secular, I was a rock and roller. That's,
Yeah.
and like I said, all the trappings that go with that. It's a fun life, and that's what I was doing. And when I think back about it, going way back, yeah, I would have said, oh yeah, maybe, no, I was a Catholic, I was Christian as could be,
Mhm.
but I really wasn't. I just believed in a God at that point, like in my 20s and stuff like
Mhm.
that. But it wasn't until about 10 years ago that I actually started waking up. Like I'm 62 now, but
Mhm.
when I think about go back to the 80s and stuff like that and the way I was living back then, that's about as secular as can be.
Well, so you're waking up now, but right, and so the one thing I'm worried about is why does it? Let's say somebody takes it that you do believe in God, right? That you truly do still.
Mhm.
What does their conjecture matter to you? Like, why does that? I'm not saying it does, but if it does have power over you, why would you let it?
Oh, it has no sway whatsoever.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
had a question though. Something you keep talking about, Thomas, was when you're looking back at the 80s and what a wild time you've had, a very secular life, which doesn't really mean anything to me, a secular life, because I have non-believing friends who are pretty boring. They just they work, they eat, they read books. I mean, not that reading
Come,
books is not
man, you're just gonna just all right. Talk about me live on the air.
right. They're just doing their business, and they're not. I mean, when I think of wild, I think of, I don't know, reckless behavior and extreme situations, bungee, base jumping, right, or whatever. But do you have an idea of being a believer comes with certain behaviors? Because I don't think that's the case. I think that there are believers who are wild people, morally
Yeah.
questionable people, but they deal with it. I knew a dude back in college who would go to these revival meetings. He was a piece of shit. And then he would go to these revival meetings and get, bathed in the blood of the lamb or whatever the hell he did there. I don't know if they had blood there or whatever.
Start it back all on Monday.
Started all back up on Monday, and he was hardcore about it. And our other friends who had deconverted from there, they kind of made excuses for him. But I came to him later. I'm like, this guy's awful, but he really believed. And so I don't think he didn't believe because he
Yeah.
was living a worldly life. I thought that he was using it as I don't know, a crutch for his guilt or a get out of jail free card. Did you have an idea that you had to be holy or that you weren't a true believer because you were whooping it up? What were your thoughts about the disjointed nature between belief and the party times?
I mean, I guess I probably should have realized it at that point that the two things didn't go together. Like the part of just always trying to be a super guy. I mean, I've always done that. But I mean,
What do you mean by a super
I did
guy?
believe in God,
Like
but then
a
at that
decent
point,
person?
I kind of knew. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You said a super guy. What do you mean by that? Do you mean like a decent person who helps people out and is considerate? Do you mean that?
Yes.
Okay. So could you not also be a super guy who is like, helps you move and volunteers time, who then also believes or doesn't believe in, Zeus or whatever, Jesus,
Joseph Smith.
Joseph Smith, and then also gets fucked up on drugs? I mean, could you not do all those things at the same time?
I could.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, you
yeah.
could. And you did.
I did for sure.
All right. I just don't see the connection. I've seen in my time here on earth, I've seen so many shitbag Christians who go to church on Sunday, who are terrible garbage people and treat people like garbage because they're selfish and hateful. I've also seen fantastic Christian people and other religious people. And I've seen non-believers who fit into those same categories as well. I don't see the connection. I think all it is people who believe or don't believe use different rhetorical frameworks to justify their behaviors and to deal with the consequences of their actions. That's what I see. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I've seen the best and worst in Christianity for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Yeah, I would. It's hard to add anything to what you say, Johnny. That's like a nail on the head. I think
because I said shitbag. Yeah, shitbag.
Yeah, you enticed me.
Yeah. Well, Thomas, how is your life now that you're no longer a believer? Are you more in touch with the consequences of your actions? Do you still party? What's going on?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
right.
I'm a fun-loving guy. Like I like to have a lot of fun.
Good.
And maybe after a year of being single, I got remarried, and my life couldn't be any better. I've got a wonderful wife that treats me well and has the same viewpoints that I have, and this is a match. What I had before was a 20-year marriage that didn't work out because of a lot. I mean, some of the reasons me for sure, but it didn't work out. But after that all passed, that everything is just better every way that you can think.
Sure. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Johnny.
I was going to say, did your ex-wife have a strong faith in a religion of some kind?
Not real strong, but strong enough. Like she still believes in everything, and it for me it doesn't wash. It just doesn't, and she's going to disagree with me. But and then I've got a son that's 24, and he's like me. And he knows it too. He's like, geez, Evan, me and you have so much in common. And it's like, I don't have anything in common with my mom and her new husband,
Well,
so yeah.
Let me touch on that, Thomas. You say you don't have anything in you're not saying this about your own mother. You're saying this about your stepson?
Yeah, he's my son.
Okay.
He's atheist also, but
he's your son. Okay.
His mom, that's my ex-wife, still believes.
Right. Well, this is something that comes up from time to time. on the show and in life, is that just because you don't have the same belief state doesn't mean you don't have something in common with folks. It's easy to, because religious belief is such a big thing for a lot of people that it can become overwhelming in the way you relate to people. And I caution your son and you and others to let that be the prime method by which you determine whether or not you have something in common. For example, my mother and I have a lot in common, but religion is not one of them. We like a lot of the same stuff. And I can talk with coworkers all day long, friends and coworkers, and never find out what their religious faith status is, right? Movies and politics. I shouldn't talk about politics at work, but we could talk about movies. I could talk about current events. I could talk about stuff that I read in the newspaper. I could talk about you can have similar senses of humor and really bond with somebody, and then maybe you go down that road of and also I believe in Thor. I'm like, oh, you do, all right. And then you just kind of stop, or you can talk about it. But you don't always have to go down that road. You don't have to define your relationship with someone as, well, we don't believe the same metaphysical claims. You don't have to. You can just acknowledge it on some level in your head.
Yeah, the people that really have that blockade in the road will make that pretty clear to you on their own. And in that case, you're just better off not even associating with those types of people.
I mean, the thing is, when I say that we didn't have anything in common, I mean, really, we had, my ex-wife, we had nothing in common. We made it work for 20 years. Yeah. But, I was always listening to music. She would want to watch TV. I mean, the smallest little things. We just didn't click.
Sure. It happens.
And everything clicks now.
That's fantastic. Great to hear that you found that experience. And I hope that your ex-wife has found some similar experience of her own.
And she's happily married now, to a new guy. And
Very good.
That's great. We're both doing good. So,
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this.
But yeah.
You had some kind of religious tradition that you were involved with when you still considered yourself a believer. Did you find that when you left the faith that you were left with any kind of a gap in your needs as far as community or the ability to talk about things of a certain nature? Did you find that when you left, you were left out in the cold?
Absolutely not. I guess I'm like any atheist when they found out that what their beliefs were before, they just go down the rabbit hole and find other people that believe like I do, like you guys, or Matt or, Seth or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
You just find that out. I had no problem adjusting whatsoever.
That's great. It's not the experience of all people, but that is definitely, we hear a lot about this. Callers call in, they left their faith and they found a God-shaped hole in their heart, or they lost their community or something. They felt like this inner longing, but not everyone's like that. Some people are quite fortunate. I think that was me, and it sounds like that was you. And Mike he's just been empty his whole life.
Well, you had the lack of God-filled hole, right? So
I really appreciate you calling in, Thomas. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah,
I appreciate it, both of you guys.
Yeah. Thank you, Thomas. Sorry, I couldn't offer much as and not someone who's been a Christian, but I do find this is the part where I do like to kind of take it in, so to speak, because it's not foreign to me in the sense I have had to help a lot of friends out that have come from that background, and that it's very prevalent really anywhere you go, especially in the US. But I get to this point sometimes where I hear such an array of things said in that, and how such a myriad of feelings that come from that. That yeah, it never really. I guess it always puts perspective into me that I feel like there's people that are somewhat fortunate enough to not have things kind of, and I can't speak for you or anyone else, but some people, they have this kind of put in front of them when before they can even really think for themselves. And so sometimes I just look back and that's for me, it's like why I always go back to at least the way I grew up. And I'm glad that I had the opportunity, and why I think, it's super important to fight for other people to have this type of freedom, even as early of an age as possible, because that's the seed that gets planted. So.
Right. I feel very bad for people that have had such a hard time dealing with things like this. And, I kind of wonder, nothing like that for me at all. It's been super. So, but I'll let you guys get on to another caller. I just want to say that both you guys are just fantastic, and I'll keep watching.
Thank you, Thomas. We appreciate it.
Thank you. You have a good day.
You too.
Mm-hmm. Bye. Yep. Bye.
Yeah. That's always one that's like harder for me in the sense, because it's like, I can only speak from a different perspective in that. And mine's so different in the fact that like I didn't leave a group of people. There was like some friends, that I had where we just kind of bounced off each other's conjecture. I was like, oh yeah, that sounds about right, And so there was no sense that's always lost it from my deconstruction of beliefs, or my epistemology, was that I didn't have the hurdle of community as much. I didn't leave that type of thing. So when I hear that, it always puts it into perspective to me that's a much heavier bag of rocks to carry.
It is for some, but we've been covering this on the nonprofits, that because of the quarantine, because of the coronavirus, because of COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, and other names that have been given to this phenomenon that we've been living through, that a lot of people have left religion, have left the active practice, the communal practice of their religion, and many are not coming back. And I think, and I'm not going to make a prediction as to whether people are going to snap back to their congregations, but when you leave that community, you might find other communities and realize that you were just involved with that community because it was your community. There's an inertia there, and that people were forced for some time to find other accommodations. And I wonder what the future of religious practice in this country is, because some were forced to stop congregating. And then once they were allowed to come back, maybe it was more hassle than it's worth, independent of belief state, right?
Sure.
My friends aren't going back to church who are believers. They're just not going back. Not anytime soon. It's so much easier to sleep in on Sunday. So
yeah, that is very true.